Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, and we're going to revisit the Heikin-Ashi candles. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. We're also launching another Into the Cryptoverse NFT tomorrow, so if you're interested in that, wait till the end of the video. Let's go ahead and jump in. So these Heikin-Ashi candles, I think are interesting because especially during this, during the last year or so of this cycle, we've noticed that there doesn't really tend to be a whole lot of short moves one way or another. It seems that every move, for the most part, to the upside or the downside is a really prolonged move. And you'll see one trend play out for a while until we flip back the other way. There's not a whole lot of in between. And you can sort of see this on the daily time frame. But really, you'll see these trends a lot better when we zoom out to longer time frames. So on the daily time frame, what do we notice? We see that, Ethereum has mostly been in a downtrend with some slight pushes to the upside. But to be completely honest, the bulls haven't shown up yet, okay? Doesn't mean they're not going to show up. They could show up tomorrow for all we know. But what we do know is that they haven't shown up yet, okay? Now, these trends become a little bit more pronounced when you zoom out to larger time frames. If you're not familiar with the Heikin-Ashi candles, they show things a bit differently. Instead of just coloring candles based on their close, or for the difference between the open and the close, it also looks to see what the prior candle was doing. It'll take the price as being, like say 1/4 of the low, the close, the open, and the high. So it does things a little bit differently rather than just looking at, say, a normal candle, which you can see there's a big difference in. Okay, the trends are not as clear when we have these moves. So we can zoom out a little bit in terms of the time frame that we're looking at. If you go look at 3-day candles, the trend becomes a little bit clearer, right? You can see very clearly the trends over the last year. You have periods of green and they stay green for a long time, but you also have periods where the move is just down for a while. And what I've found in crypto, and especially over the last year, is that when it's moving up, it's best to just assume it's going to continue moving up until you see some slight shift back the other way. But also, when the market's moving down, you're more or less just better off assuming it'll continue moving down until proven otherwise. And this really does become a little bit more pronounced on the 3 days. Now, one of the things to remember is that the shorter the time frame, the more noise there is. Okay, so for instance, on the 1 day, these green candles over here, where we saw a brief move by Ethereum, you could argue that it was noise because the overarching trend has remained down. If you zoom out, though, a lot of these phases over here that are green on the daily are not green on the 3-day. In fact, you can see there's a lot more red. And actually, we are currently in a green 3-day candle that's ending in approximately 2 hours. But this is the last, assuming it closes green, this is the last green Heikin-Ashi 3-day candle that Ethereum has had since it was at around $4,000. So not a whole lot has really changed over, basically over the last month and a half or so. Another thing to look at is to zoom out even further. So again, the further we zoom out, the less noise there is, and you could argue that the signal to noise ratio gets a little bit better. Why don't we first go look at 5-day and see if that gets rid of some of the noise? Well, if you look at 5-day, one of the things you'll recognize is that currently we're not in a green 5-day Heikin-Ashi candle. I should remind you that downtrends and uptrends are characterized in very similar ways. Uptrends are characterized by large candle bodies, no undershadows, and just overshadows. And so you see that over here. And oftentimes, when you're in an uptrend, you just want to see that. And once you see it start to break, then you have to remain a little flexible, right? Because at that point, you have to understand that, well, we could see it turn back the other way once the trend starts to show slight signs of weakness. Now, it doesn't mean it has to. It doesn't mean it has to change. You can see there was a period here where there was a little bit of a fight too. If you go back to the summer, you can see that Ethereum put up a fight in the middle, but it continued moving down. But before it actually turned green, there was an overshadow, right? There was some overshadow on the last one. So one of the things that I've said before is until there's at least an overshadow on some of these longer time frame candles, you're better off just assuming the trend remains down. That's not to say that I want the trend to be down. I would prefer that Ethereum just rallies on up to much higher prices. But we're also kidding ourselves if we don't at least explore what the downside risk is and assume that prices could go lower, in the event, especially if stocks pull back. But actually, recently stocks have been moving back up, so I'm at least somewhat optimistic about Ethereum trying to turn the tide. Now, you can see on the current 5-day candle, there is a bit of an overshadow. So the bulls are trying to put up a fight, but we haven't quite seen it yet, right? We haven't actually seen that breakout that we really want to see. And a lot of this is completely tuned out when you go to weekly timeframes. You look at weekly timeframes, what do you see? You see many candles now that are red. I went one too far. It says it's 11, but that's the difference between them. So really there's 12 red Heikin-Ashi candles in a row for Ethereum. Now the current one could flip green. It's possible that it does flip green, but it's not something that I'm counting on. What I would like to see is the bulls show some level of strength. And one way to do that is to get an overshadow on a red weekly Heikin-Ashi, right? An overshadow. We saw an overshadow here before the trend shifted. We also saw an overshadow here before the trend shifted. We haven't seen that yet. Could it happen? Oh, of course it could. But what I'm waiting for, and what I would feel a lot more optimistic about, would be to see these Heikin-Ashi candles for not only Ethereum, but also for Bitcoin as well, to flip back the other way and to see the bulls put up a fight. And we just simply have not seen that yet. And arguably, we are probably flirting with some of the longest time frames of this many red candles in a row. You can see there has been a period before. This one was 10 was the difference between them, so about 11 candles there. This one here was brutal. I mean, this one was 23 in a row. This one was brutal. But certainly, the way I would prefer to navigate the cryptoverse is to generally assume that trends are your friend until the end, right? Until they're not, and then you can sort of be open-minded to the idea that at that point you have to think that, okay, well, now it could flip back the other way. But until that happens, just remain incredibly cautious. And that's what I'm doing, right? I would still remain incredibly cautious as long as we're just looking at red candle after red candle after red candle. And if you don't have a very strong risk appetite, one thing you could do is just simply wait for there to be some signs of life, right? And until there's signs of life, you can just sort of not be quite as risky in the crypto market if you so desire. But hopefully we will see it turn around somewhat soon. So that's basically what I wanted to mention with the Heikin-Ashi candles for Ethereum. We are launching for those that have stuck around. I didn't want to put it at the beginning of the video. I know a lot of people aren't super into NFTs, but I am. We are trying to build out an Into the Cryptoverse NFT ecosystem, and it's going to take some time. So bear with me, please, on that. But we are launching a new NFT tomorrow, and then we're going to launch another one 2 days after that. And if you want to see it, it's just an image. It's not going to be a video, but this is just sort of like just shows you what it is. I would encourage you that if you have your sound turned up really loud, now would be a good time to turn your sound down, so your ears don't get blown out here. But here's the new NFT. So I've often said that I'm a Bitcoin and Ethereum bull, but I have a couple panda bears next to me, basically to always keep me in check and not to assume that the lofty price predictions in the short term that you'll often see, not to assume that they have to play out, okay? And to always be conservative and recognize that the downside risk is there. A lot of us love Bitcoin, a lot of us love Ether, but we also recognize that there are phases when the market does have significant pullbacks. That doesn't mean that the asset class is any less relevant. It just means that we are going through, various phases in the market where sometimes it gets really heated and we have a lot of new people, and then other times it's not, and we go down for a while. This isn't the first time this has played out, and if you stay in crypto long enough, it certainly will not be the last. So just a reminder, if you do get that NFT and then you also get the one that we launched 2 days later, then on May 3rd, if you have both of them in an address, you can claim another NFT for free. But that one, the claim that you can do to get the third one will not happen until May. Okay, so check it out. We'll launch it tomorrow. And if NFTs aren't your thing, that's perfectly fine. We're just trying to explore all the different areas of the cryptoverse, and there certainly are quite a few. So, going back just briefly to Ethereum and the Heikin-Ashi candles, one of the things I've mentioned in a lot of recent videos is that, look, Ethereum has mostly just spent the last year between 2 and 4K with deviations on either side. We deviated to $1,700 back in the summer. We also deviated to $4,800 back in November. We deviated to $4,400 back in May. But most of it has just spent between those two areas. And I am trying to explain that, look, this asset class does require a long-term mindset. And while I try to give you what I think is going to happen, you need to understand that no one knows what is going to happen in this asset class. If you ask anyone who was buying Ethereum back in 2019 and 2020, it's easy to look back and be like, oh, like they're so lucky. But in reality, we were buying it at $80. We were also buying it $300. And then we were buying it at $80 again, or about $100 again. And you might think like, oh, well, $100, $300, like, oh, that's such a great price. Yeah, but at the time, if you bought it for $300 and then you watch it drop to $100, I mean, think about that for a minute. Like, think about how your portfolio in the short term would have looked absolutely abysmal. Okay, so I find that a lot of people it's easy to look back and say that it's, they wish they could have bought when the prices were low. But when they look at prices that are, say, 100 to 300 and then back to 100, it just seems like, oh, simple. Like, yeah, you just buy. Look, we're going to have plenty of phases like that. And Ethereum could easily drop below the current prices. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It easily could drop. I mean, we're currently at $2,600. We could easily go back down. So I just want people to remember that if you want to be the person that makes a lot of money in a future mania phase, then you have to also be the person that sticks around when most other people don't want to. And, arguably, we've been in a corrective phase for quite a long time now. It could go on for a while. I have no idea exactly how long it'll last. But what I would say is that if you can manage to just stay around the cryptoverse and have a multi-year time frame, then the odds are very much in your favor. If you require yourself to only be present and in mania phases, then you will always miss out on the best opportunities in the cryptocurrency asset class. That's just the way it is. And unfortunately, I don't control the way it is. I just like to tell you guys the way that it is. Remember, bull markets can make you money. Bear markets can make you rich. If you have the courage and the patience to stick it out during the bear market. And always recognize that things can get worse. And then furthermore, one last thing, when realizing that, when we're in a downtrend, and if people do say, look, we could go lower, they're not trying to, we're not sitting here trying to rain on your parade or anything. I have a large position in Ether, and I would prefer to see it go higher, especially since I took profits over here, but I did not take profits over here. So it would certainly be in my interest to ultimately see it go higher, but I also don't want to just sit here and say that it has to go higher tomorrow. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people temper their expectations and just be pleasantly surprised when prices move up. That's the way I've always navigated the cryptoverse, and that's the way that I will continue to do so. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. We also do have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. And if you want to check out the Into the Cryptoverse NFTs, then you can find a link to that in the description below. The ones that are already launched, you'll already see them there, but we will be launching the one I just showed you tomorrow and then another one 2 days later. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.